It was nearing the end of my second semester in nursing school. At 22, I was brimming with optimism, excitement, and big dreams. Life felt like an open book, with each blank page eagerly waiting to be filled with experiences, love, and the promise of a bright future. It was the time when everything seemed possible, and I was ready to embrace it all. But there was one thing I was absolutely certain about. I wasn't the type to date casually. It had always been my rule, each relationship had to mean something. My heart was a guarded treasure, and I had promised myself that the next person I let in would be someone I could imagine building a future with. I wasn't in a rush to find love, but I knew what I wanted when the time was right. My dating history wasn't extensive, but it was meaningful. My first love was my high school sweetheart, a pure, innocent romance that bloomed in the sheltered halls of adolescence. It was a love that felt safe and untainted by the world. We were young and hopeful, but when college came, our paths diverged as naturally as the changing seasons. We parted ways, and though it was painful, I knew it was for the best. Then, there was the guy I briefly dated during my freshman year of college. On paper, he seemed great, ambitious, funny, and kind. But despite our shared interests, our worlds were just too different. He thrived in chaos, while I sought structure. I found myself trying to fit into his world, but it was like trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole. We ended things quietly, with little fanfare, but it was clear we weren't meant to be. And like so many others my age, I endured the whirlwind of a toxic situationship, a messy entanglement that left me with more questions than answers and a scar deeper than I'd like to admit. It was a painful, necessary lesson in self-respect. I learned the importance of setting boundaries and never compromising my self-worth for someone else's approval. When I met him, my third relationship, I thought things might finally be different. He wasn't a stranger, not exactly. We'd crossed paths a few times, enough to exchange polite nods and fleeting smiles. Once, I even attended a party at his place, though we barely spoke beyond the standard pleasantries. He was attractive in a quiet, self-assured way, but back then, he was just another face in the crowd. That all changed when he added me on social media. It started small, a few likes on my posts, an occasional comment. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe he was just being friendly, or maybe I was overthinking it. But then, out of the blue, he slid into my DMs. His words were casual yet curious, like he'd been watching me from afar and finally decided to reach out. He didn't make it feel like some big, dramatic move, just an easy, low-key invitation to chat. Within a week, he asked me out. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to take the leap. But there was something about him, something that intrigued me, that made me wonder if this could be something real. So I said yes. Our first date was at a cozy local steakhouse. The kind of place where the lighting is dim, and the conversation feels intimate. Neither of us was particularly hungry, so we stuck to drinks and appetizers, letting the conversation flow freely. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, our biggest fears. It felt so effortless, like we had known each other for years. From the moment I stepped out of my car, he made me feel seen. "Wow, you look beautiful," he said, his tone genuine, his eyes lingering just long enough to make me blush. It wasn't one of those hollow compliments meant to flatter, it was real. It was the kind of compliment that stays with you, that makes you feel special in a way you hadn't in years. By the end of the evening, I was smitten. He left for a work trip soon after, but we stayed connected, texts, calls, even planning our next weekend together. I couldn't believe how quickly and effortlessly we clicked. It felt natural, like the kind of connection I'd been waiting for. We shared stories, laughed about silly things, and found ourselves imagining a future that seemed full of promise. That weekend, he invited me on a trip to the coast with some of his friends. I was nervous but excited, eager to see how our connection would unfold outside of the bubble of one-on-one dates. The drive there was long but lively, filled with laughter and playful banter. At one point, I had to change clothes in the truck, and I couldn't help but notice him stealing a glance or two in the rearview mirror. It was cheeky and a little embarrassing, But his reaction made me smile. He didn't make me feel awkward about it. He just made it feel like we were in it together. That evening, we joined his friends for dinner, played some games at a nearby casino, and ended the night at a bayside bar before heading back to the hotel. Sharing a bed for the first time was awkward. His friends were in the same room, but the chemistry between us was undeniable. When our lips met, it felt spontaneous, electric, and right. By morning, I was convinced he could be the one. He made me feel safe, wanted, and valued in ways I hadn't experienced before. Everything felt like it was falling into place. The next day was spent on his boat, where he barely let go of my hand. His attention was intoxicating, and for the first time in a long time, I felt desired in a way that went beyond the surface. Even the sunburn I got that day couldn't dampen my mood. That night, back at his place, we showered, snuggled up, and watched movies until we both drifted off to sleep. I was falling for him, hard and fast. But then, without warning, he ghosted me. At first, I made excuses for his silence. He's busy, maybe overwhelmed with work, or perhaps he just wasn't good at communicating. I told myself it was no big deal. But as the days turned into a week with no word from him, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. Then it happened. I stumbled upon pictures of him with another girl on social media. My heart shattered in an instant. It was like everything I had believed in was a lie. In a fit of anger and heartbreak, I posted a picture of us together and confronted him. His response was lame, almost insulting. "I just need things to cool off. I want us to look like we came together naturally, not like I'm an ass." And just like that, he disappeared again. I told myself I wouldn't beg for anyone's love or attention, and I tried to move on. But 2 weeks later, he resurfaced, full of apologies and promises. He said all the right things, how sorry he was, how much he liked me, how he couldn't stop thinking about me. It was everything I wanted to hear, and against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. That night, he was the perfect gentleman. He said all the right words, how much he cared for me, how he wanted to make things work, how he was willing to try harder. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. It was easy to get swept up in the charm and the promises. I fell for it all over again. From there, things moved quickly. Weekends turned into spontaneous adventures. His family embraced me like one of their own, and I began to think this could really be it. I was happy, truly happy, for a while. But the red flags were always there, lurking just beneath the surface. There were moments of doubt, things that didn't add up, but I pushed them aside. I convinced myself that we were fine, that love could conquer all. But it couldn't. He lied. He disappeared for entire nights without explanation. He grew jealous over harmless interactions, accusing me of things I hadn't done. Every time he yelled or blamed me, I forgave him, desperate to hold on to the fleeting moments of happiness he gave me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And when he promised to be home by midnight but didn't show up until sunrise, I knew it was the beginning of the end. His excuse was laughable. He claimed he'd fallen asleep at a gas station. When he finally passed out, I went through his phone and found the messages he thought he'd erased. The truth was staring me in the face, undeniable and devastating. There were words, pictures, and promises exchanged with someone else. That was the moment I knew I had to let go. I had poured every ounce of myself into a relationship that had been doomed from the start. I had loved him, supported him, and even built bonds with his family, only to be left empty-handed. Looking back, I see how much I lost trying to hold on to someone who never deserved me. But I've also gained something invaluable, the strength to walk away and the wisdom to never settle for less than I deserve. It's a lesson I wish I hadn't needed, but one that has shaped me in ways I never imagined. Now, as I step into the next chapter of my life, I carry these lessons with me. I'm focused on my dreams, my career, and the kind of love that complements my worth, not diminishes it. I'm no longer willing to settle for anything less than I deserve. I've learned that real love doesn't need excuses, and that lesson is worth far more than any fleeting relationship ever could be. Because at the end of the day, I am enough. And that's all I need to remember.